Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our Talks with Walt as we turn now in our conversations of all of the poems of Leaves of Grass, the deathbed edition of Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to the final 13th section of Salut, this tribute to the world, as we have been saying it. The assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net down the left-hand side. That is to say, the Talks with Walt playlist. And we're hoping that you've been with us now all the way from the inscriptions discussion at the very beginning of Leaves of Grass up to and including passage 12 of Salut. We now come to the very end where the pronouns I, me, my, myself will now be referenced 20 times at least in this final passage, as he has gone through this unbelievable categorizing of all of the places of the world. Looking at a globe from all these perspectives, he says it, my spirit has passed in compassion and determination around the whole earth. Now, this idea of my spirit, and we'll have heard this already in our study of Song of Myself, passages especially 1 through 5, spirit, soul, right? He says, I've gone all around the globe, notice, in compassion and determination. In other words, I want to include everybody, right? Around the whole earth, this idea of encompassing everything. I've looked for equals and lovers, he loves, of course, that word, right? And found them ready for me in all lands. I think some divine rapport has equalized me with them. It is interesting that the word equalized is used this only time in all of Leaves of Grass. Of course, the idea of equality is a foundational concept for Whitman in Leaves of Grass. Then, sounding very much like Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, a poem that Whitman loved, you vapors, I think I have risen with you, moved away to distant continents and fallen down there. You'll think, of course, of those final lines of Shelley's Ode to the West Wind and the ashes that, or the sparks that he's going to drop to create a new fire if winter come, can spring be far behind. We've given a full lecture of that poem at learnstrong.net. He says, I think I have blown with you, you winds. And think about the way that winds blowing has been such an integral part of our reading of Leaves of Grass up to this point. You waters, obviously one of the other powerful word pictures in sailing. I have fingered his great love of verbs, right? I have fingered every shore with you. I have run through what any river or strait of the globe has run through. I have taken my stand on the basis of peninsulas and on the high embedded rocks to cry thence. In other words, I have gone all over the world, and I've celebrated in this poem, he says, so many places in the world to say one thing. And of course, it's the title of the poem, Salut. That is to say, tribute, celebration of all of the world, making this poem one of the greatest single statements of the universality of all of humankind. And then he finishes, what cities the light or warmth penetrates, key word, obviously, for Whitman, remember, to the garden of the world. We already saw this word penetrates. I penetrate those cities myself. All islands to which birds wing their way, I wing my way myself. And we're going to play this. We're going to play this interpenetration game when we get to by Blue Ontario's shores in the 17th passage. This idea of flight is obviously also central to our reading. And then the final 4 lines of the poem. Toward you all, and it's an interesting way to finish because he comes back to America just like he did in passage 11. Toward you all, in America's name, I raise high the perpendicular hand. In other words, Whitman gives the high five. Isn't that awesome? So Whitman gives the high five to the world and he says, hey, I want you to know that we don't think of ourselves as any greater than any of you, either from the past or to come. He says, I make the signal to remain after me in sight forever. And we're not sure if the me here is America or Whitman and his Leaves of Grass. It obviously could be both because he thought of them as synonymous, right? To remain after me in sight forever for all, notice their stacking of the H sounds here, all the haunts and homes of men. It is interesting that he doesn't say men and women. Here, when he obviously uses the word men, he means all men and women. Clearly, he has an appreciation of the equality of both, no question. Well, let's just finish now with Salut, and obviously at 2a. America, for Whitman, is the great leader to and for the world. Why? Because for Whitman, it accepts its place in history as being necessary, and yet not in any way exclusivist for Whitman, right? At 2b, well, we've commented on it repeatedly, how this is a song or a psalm, and that is to say the repetitions are all there and the rhythms are all there. At 3a, we've said that we are reading this poem to get ready for passage to India, but because we're about to turn to it, I would like for you to write down as well, Song of the Open Road, the next. It's what many call the most precious song of them all. Some have called it the 23rd Psalm of Leaves of Grass. That is to say, the heart of all of the poems. Some consider it the greatest poem of all of Leaves of Grass. We'll get into it later. Finally, at 3b, a couple of questions that you can relate to. Do you think that in the end, America is still the world's leader? Do you think that Americans still think of America as being a nation that is in fact not just leading, but welcoming all other nations of the world to see it as significant and equal at the same time? Finally, what is your favorite image in this entire poem? And maybe the one that most disturbs you as well and makes you have a second thought about Whitman and his poetic project. Well, now that we are through Salut, we turn, as I said, to Song of the Open Road. What for so many in 303, for many years, has been the great poem of walking, journeying, that is to say, the Great Odyssey. I look forward to your return. Thank you.